The Corrupted Lunar by X Flare the Hedgehog X. Sometimes you wonder, is what we see the true reality that surrounds us, or is it simply a never-ending dream that we will never wake up from? My name is Tom Brown. I'm a researcher who works in Canalave City. I had just returned from an expedition from Iron Island. Before I started working, I took my Pokémon Staryu out to play in the bay for a while, seeing as it rarely got time outside of its Pokéball nowadays. While I was outside, I heard a couple talking about a rumor that a Pokémon had been causing nightmares. I have heard of the nightmares on the news recently, so this wasn't something new to me. In fact, I had started investigating it in my free time. With this information in mind, I returned Staryu to its Pokéball and made haste for my office. I was in such a hurry I almost missed something blackish floating in the air above the town. As I sat at the desk, I looked at the picture of my wife and 2 children. As I began to log into my laptop, I felt as if I was being watched. I didn't look up, as it had to have been my imagination. After I logged in, I continued on the research on these nightmares that plagued everyone I had started a few days ago. While searching, I found an interesting website that had a good bit of information on it. As I read the findings posted on the site, I opened my research notes and prepared it to move what I found over to them. As I read, I began to feel somewhat drowsy, as if I could fall asleep at any moment. Trying to fight this problem, I continued to read. I scrolled to about midway down the page to find a JPEG file extension. Clicking it, an image came up with the caption, "Full Moon Island." I looked at the picture in front of me, then the name. Where had I heard Full Moon Island before? I knew that I had heard the name recently, but I couldn't remember where. I studied the image carefully and soon found something odd about it. Right in the center of the island looked to be an eerie glow that looked dark. As I stared at it, trying to get a closer look, the computer shut off. I looked at the screen, confused as to what had just happened. Maybe the internal battery died? Thinking that was it, I reached over to grab my charger cable. I didn't feel it and grabbed my bag, scouring through it. Suddenly I heard a tapping on the window. Thinking it was just kids trying to play a prank, I looked over to see a black mass floating in the window. It looked to be about 4 foot 11 inches, with blue, pupilless eyes and a white fog-like plume that floated continuously upon its head. I jumped, startled at the sudden sight of whatever that was. Warily, I reached over to dial the front desk and call security up to my office. After I called them, I looked over at the window again, seeing it wasn't there anymore. With a sigh of relief, I turned back to the computer only to find whatever it was floating right in front of me. I fell back in my chair, my eyes wide and sweating. As security entered and asked me what it was, I told them to get this thing out of my office and out of here. They just looked at me in disbelief. I asked why they were looking at me, and they shook their heads and looked at me, saying there was nothing there. What? As they walked out, I looked where my laptop was, seeing the black mass wasn't there. I then looked at the window to see whatever it was had disappeared. I found my charger cable and plugged it in my laptop. I checked to see if the crash messed up my computer. To my surprise, the screen came back to exactly the same page and image that it had died on. I found this odd, but seeing that I wouldn't have to look for it again, I didn't complain. I took what was on the website and attempted to move it into the file where I left all my notes. When I opened my research folder and clicked on the documents I already had on the matter, they wouldn't open. I tried a few more times to open it, getting the same message every time. The file you wish to open is corrupted. I sighed in dismay, thinking that the crash had wiped out my notes. Seeing as the one reason I came in today was lost, I decided I would see if any of my colleagues wanted to go fishing. When I couldn't find them, I asked the woman at the front desk where they were, getting the reply that they had gone to Full Moon Island. That is when I realized why the name was familiar to me. My boss had told me a few days ago that they were planning to explore the island in hopes of finding new discoveries. I was supposed to go on this exploration, but I got called to Iron Island at the last second. I walked out and headed home to get my super rod. When I got there, I saw a note on the fridge from my wife stating her and the kids went to visit a relative's house when I was on Iron Island and they would be back in a few days. After acquiring my rod, I walked down to the bay. As I walked down the street, I watched as Pidgeys and Sparrows flew in the sky, playing and trying to catch each other. While I rounded the corner that led to the bay, I heard a car horn. Looking forward, I saw a truck heading right for me. I I was able to jump out of the way at the last second, but when I turned around to get the license plate number, the car was gone. I sighed, thinking all of the work I was doing was causing me stress that was playing tricks on my mind. Maybe I needed this day off more than I thought. As I sat by the bay near the ferry, I cast my line into the water and waited for something to bite. While I sat there, I began to feel more drowsy. My eyes slowly closed and I fell asleep. A few hours later, I woke up, stretching. As I looked around, I noticed it was already afternoon. I smiled and watched the sunset. As I leaned back, I felt myself press against something. I tensed up, just sitting there wondering what it was. I slowly turned around to see the same black mass floated in front of me. Startled, I backed up, forgetting I was right next to the edge. I fell over it and fell into the sea. I awoke a few days later on the shore of an island. As I got up slowly, I looked around. I didn't see anything but thick woods and an endless sea. As I questioned where I was, I saw footprints in the wet ground. I realized that they were the same size as one of my coworkers' shoes. My eyes widened. I was on Full Moon Island. I decided I would see if I could find my colleagues and find out if I could lend a hand, walking into the thick wood. I came to a clearing where I found their gear, but they weren't there. Could they have gone off and would be back later? I sat, waiting for hours on end, feeling more and more tired. While I tried to combat the urge to sleep, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. When I laid back and looked at the sky, my eyes finally closed. After a few hours, I awoke, seeing something staring at me. It wasn't what had been following me today. It was something else, but what? I didn't move, and I just stared into its pink eyes, its darkened body just floating above the ground, and me. It simply stared at me. After a moment, I moved my arms to allow myself to lift my upper body off the ground. As I lifted, whatever this thing was moved back. As I stood, I reached for my Pokédex to see what this thing was. What I met with startled me. The Pokédex said this Pokémon was the legendary Cresselia, but it couldn't have been Cresselia. All our reports and records told us Cresselia was the Lunar type, and didn't have the ability to cause nightmares. Also, its skin was dark instead of blue. Its dark pink tuft on its head was completely black. As I looked at it floating in front of me, I thought back to something one of the scientists I worked with said, saying that Cresselia was basically the opposite of Darkrai. I felt that this was just an inside joke that they played on coworkers and waved it off. Now, though, I was staring one of the Pokémon dead in its eyes. There was still something bugging me, though. If Darkrai was the opposite of Cresselia and controlled nightmares, then what was wrong with Cresselia, and why did it look and act so differently than our records stated? I stood there, looking at the thing in front of me, but there was no signs of what had tormented me this entire day. I couldn't help but wonder if maybe it was leading me here for some purpose, as if it wanted me to help it. While I looked into Cresselia's eyes, I saw nothing but a dark pink void, devoid of emotion. After I stared into its eyes for a few moments, I worked up the courage to follow my instincts and run. I ran through the thick woods that enveloped the island, searching for a way out. Everywhere I turned, Cresselia was right there to stop me. After a solid 10 minutes of attempting to escape, I came to a cliff. As I backed away to procure a safe distance, I backed into Cresselia. Startled, I fell over the cliff, plummeting towards the jagged rocks below. As I watched Cresselia begin to get farther away, my eyes began to close as I inevitably gave in to the lull of the drowsiness that enveloped me. That was the corrupted Lunar. Final thoughts? A good idea executed very poorly. I like the idea, but I really think this story needed to be completely rewritten. I'm just gonna read my notes, and I think you'll get the point. Having the protagonist's reactions to seeing a monster and nearly being hit by a truck, be going fishing and thinking that it's their mind playing tricks on them is completely ridiculous. How does the guy know that he's been in the sea for a few days? How did he survive multiple days without drowning in the sea? How did he survive that long without food and water? If this really is the sea, then it's salt water and he can't drink it for nourishment. Why does he know the size of his coworker's shoes, and why would he assume that must mean it's him and not any other person with the same shoe size in the world? How does this make him assume that he's on Full Moon Island? Why is his first reaction to believing he can find his coworkers that he can help them with their job rather than explaining the crazy shit that's going on? We are literally given no hint whatsoever as to why this has happened to the protagonist. We have no idea why he was targeted, we have no idea why he was killed, and the only reason he got to Full Moon Island was by sheer luck of him falling into the sea and somehow waking up on that island. If the plan was just to kill this guy, why did it have to be at Full Moon Island? If the plan wasn't to kill the guy and he was unintentionally tricked into backing off the cliff, then I guess everyone involved is just an idiot because the guy got himself killed and Cresselia never got to do whatever was planned. That's it for my notes. I think that's all I need to say. That's it for this creepypasta. Tune in again next Saturday when we tackle yet another story made and sent by the fans with new ownership. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the Creepypasta Section Y forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up with me on my blog posts, join my Facebook fan page linked below, and if you want to support me and what I do, check out my Patreon page in the description. Remember that if you want a story to be read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forums, as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.